here in this moment, and then you just disappear at the end of the exhale into this wide open stillness, spaciousness, the nature of which, if we could, and as we do, wake up to who we truly are, the way that we would be and will be and are in the world is we would be loving and kind and compassionate and joyful. And the most subtle of all of them, that all of them are based in, is equanimity. Equanimity is being able to sit right in the center of the mandala of the whole world exactly as it is, arising and passing, and all of our likes and dislikes, and the things that are harmful and hurtful and suffering and good and bad, and also in the center of breathing in and breathing out. Can you feel right now? There's a center point. It's quiet and it's still. It's non-reactive. Doesn't have opinions. You might call it Buddha nature. You might call it love. There's two translations of the word equanimity. One means to, I'm looking right now to try to make sure I get this right, is to look over. To look over. To be able to, it's like being on a mountaintop. We're just completely right on the ground, along with everything, completely accepting each thing exactly as it is. So it has a feeling of equality, because from a place of equanimity and non-judgment and non-separation, how could you make one thing better or worse, or one person? How could you elevate one thing or yourself or any part of yourself and make the other part of yourself less than? So there's this feeling of deep acceptance of everything. So I was thinking, it seems to me that the precepts, the Bodhisattva precepts, well, one, let's acknowledge that this time of the year is all of the traditions. It seems to be kind of a riches of traditions right now that would be kind of a waste to miss what must be a potent time. There's Easter, there's Passover, there's Ramadan, there's full moon, there's spring, there's rain here. It's like, my goodness, let's join with the whole world, and as Buddhists do something useful and say, we're here and we care. There's in Buddhism, one of the teachings is about ethical behavior, is that if you're going around lying and stealing and doing all kinds of things, small or large, because of course most of us probably aren't killing people outright, but that anything, any karmic behavior creates it's hard to have a still mind in the midst of it, because it's like, oh, I just hurt somebody, or oh, I didn't mean to do that, but it just happened. So when we take the precepts, it's really a beautiful pointing to, oh, this is the mind of stillness and peace for ourselves and for the whole world. I was thinking with the precepts, it starts with the refuges. We'll do this in a minute. It starts with the three refuges, and the three refuges. I take refuge in Buddha. I take refuge in Dharma. I take refuge in Sangha. Have the feeling of it's the most wide open, it's you're taking refuge in your own true nature. You're taking refuge in the nature of everything. You're taking refuge in the coming and going and no coming and going of rain and sun and stars and moon and past and present and future, and everything is singing the Dharma and the Sangha of all beings that always has been and always will be. Essentially, when you take refuge, you're taking refuge in everything exactly as it is and as it isn't, because the minute you grab hold of it, it turns into something, right? And then the minute you grab a hold of something, then you like it or you don't like it, or but that's what the refuges do, is you start with this wide open heart. I take refuge. And then the three pure precepts begin to bring us more down into our bodies and into well, from the boundlessness of the Brahma Viharas, it's like, okay, if that's our true nature, it's love, kindness, compassion, joy, stillness. You're still a human being, right? So the three pure precepts say, well, okay, pay attention. If you're paying attention and you're in a human body, you're going to notice that you have likes and dislikes. And so the three pure precepts begin to bring it more down into the particular and into the body and into the particularity of the moment and our karma. And it basically is, in the midst of all of this, I really want to do good. I really want to try to not do harm. It's this I that's saying, this is my deepest heart's desire. And the third is to always act with others in mind, which means really, it's just the truth of it. You're not separate. We just sort of get a little self-centered, but it's no, I really, I want, whatever I do, I want to be aware that it's affecting Joni, because I care about Joni. And I care about what's happening across the world, and I care about what's happening with Erica, who's way over there in Colorado, and everything ripples. And then once you start to settle down more and more, find equanimity in, I just want to try to be as good a person as I can, then the 10 clear mind precepts get very specific and say, not as rules, not as don't do this and do this, but to me it feels like, oh, the ancients across space and time, the same ones who brought us the Brahma Viharas, it's like the kind of the God realm or whatever you want to think about, said, you're a human being. If you would like to try to be a good human being, these are places where you should particularly pay attention, because this is places where you could get in trouble. And of course, once that all gets stirred up, then equanimity, well, it's going to be really hard. And it's going to be really hard to be kind, because you can't be kind to yourself, because you're already kind of running around in your own head. And anyway, it goes on and on. The beautiful thing is when you do a full moon ceremony, which this one is has a taste and a flavor of, it's been done since the beginning of Buddhist practice once a month. The monks or the nuns would get together, because if you're with another human being, you're gonna do harm. No matter how hard you tried, you probably bumped into somebody, not to mention some part of yourself. So you come together and you do repentance, and we'll do the repentance verse, which is all my ancient twisted karma from beginningless greed, hate, and delusion, born through body, speech, and mind, I now fully avow, which feels to me like just beginning. It's such a relief to say I'm a human being. There's so much equanimity in just saying I'm a human being, and you're a human being, and you're a human being, and we're all in this together. And we're all going to wake up and do the very best we can together. And then you'll see the language in this one as we go along. But the feeling is, because it's a full moon ceremony and you do it on the full moon, is in this tradition, enlightenment is often described as a full moon. It's like being aware of the fullness, the wholeness of everything. That includes all the phases of the moon. So I think that's really important, that it includes the dark of the moon, it includes the waxing moon, it includes the waning moon, it includes all of the things that you like and don't like. It includes, how do you find equanimity in the midst of war? How do you find equanimity in the midst of the uncertainty of the pandemic? How do we find a deep ground in the midst of all of it that isn't indifference? It doesn't mean a non-attachment that, yeah, well, that's too bad because I'm a spiritually enlightened person, and those poor people who are suffering, if they knew more about equanimity, maybe they wouldn't care so much about or grieve so much about what's happening around them. I actually, full moon means full moon. It illuminates everything. And I would encourage you to go out in a full moon. It's a little cloudy here, but in the full moon, right before and after, the light of the full moon is really different than the light of the sun. And what is that quality? Sunlight is beautiful. Sun-faced Buddha, moon-faced Buddha. But there is something very beautiful about seeing with the eyes of the moon and how it illuminates the world. It's a different kind of seeing. I think there's something to be learned there. So, if we go into chat, if you're on the screen, and if you're here, if you go to page oh dear. You know what? What's in here is different than what I'm going to have everybody say in chat. So I'm gonna say the precepts and have each one and have everybody ignore for right now what's in your chant book if you're here or in your chant book there. I'm going to say the precepts and we'll do call and response. I'll say it, and if you want to, you can say it back. But when you're saying it, pay attention to what resonates in the body, and if there's something in particular that comes forward during this reciting, this chanting of the precepts. Because then we're going to go in small groups and you're going to have a chance to just talk about how the precepts are resounding in you right now before we do the ceremony. Okay? How about, can I have a bell, Gretchen? Sure. Okay. So I'll say it, you guys say it back to me, and you on your home screen can say it at home. And I'll ring a bell. That's nice. Shelley just put, oh, people here are putting their hands in gasho. Oh, that's good. Okay, you can do that if you want. Take a deep breath. Let's do this for the whole world. I take refuge in Buddha, the principle of enlightenment within. I take refuge in Buddha, the principle of enlightenment within. I take refuge in Dharma, the enlightened way of understanding and living. I take refuge in Dharma, the enlightened way of understanding and living. I take refuge in Sangha, the community of all beings. I take refuge in Sangha, the community of all beings. The three pure precepts. I vow to avoid all action that creates suffering. I vow to avoid all action that creates suffering. I vow to do all action that creates true happiness. I vow to do all action that creates true happiness. I vow to act with others always in mind. I vow to act with others always in mind. The 10 clear mind precepts. Not to kill, but to nurture life. Not to kill, but to nurture life. Not to steal, but to receive what is offered as a gift. Not to steal, but to receive what is offered as a gift. Not to misuse sexuality, but to be caring and faithful in intimate relationships. Not to misuse sexuality, but to be caring and faithful in intimate relationships. Not to lie, but to be truthful. Not to lie, but to be truthful. Not to intoxicate with substances or doctrines, but to promote clarity and awareness. Not to intoxicate with substances or doctrines, but to promote clarity and awareness. Not to speak of others' faults, but to speak out of loving kindness. Not to speak of others' faults, but to speak out of loving kindness. Not to praise self at the expense of others, but to be modest. Not to praise self at the expense of others, but to be modest. Not to be possessive of anything, but to be generous. Not to be possessive of anything, but to be generous. Not to harbor anger, but to forgive. Not to harbor anger, but to forgive. Not to do anything to diminish the triple treasure, but to support and nurture it. Not to do anything to diminish the triple treasure, but to support and nurture it. You are now a child of the Buddha.